21, 17th of September 7th, 1940, the sirens begin as a single note, long and metallic, then multiply across the city until the sound folds in on itself. It is not loud yet, it is patient. It carries the certainty of what is coming. Above ground, the sky is still intact. Windows glow, trams move. People hesitate at corners, counting the seconds between the first warning and the first explosion, hoping, always hoping, that this time the sound will fade. It does not. Far off somewhere east, a low concussion rolls through the streets. Then another. The interval shortens. The city seems to inhale and hold it. At platform level deep underground, the air changes before the sound arrives. A pressure, a vibration through iron rails and concrete walls. Dust sifts down in thin lines from the ceiling seams. Thomas Avery stands at the edge of the platform, his boots planted where the yellow line would be painted years later. He is an engineer with London Transport assigned to night inspections, clipboard tucked under one arm, pocket watch clenched in his hand. He knows this station's tolerances by heart. The load-bearing columns, the drainage channels, the places where water collects after heavy rain. None of that accounts for what he hears now, the dull, growing percussion of bombs walking closer through the city. Avery looks up the stairs. The rules are clear. Stations are not shelters. Trains must keep running. Order must be maintained. He has repeated those sentences to himself all week, even as rumors spread from station to station, even as he watched people sleep on platforms the night before, wrapped in coats and newspapers, pretending they were waiting for a delayed train. Another explosion lands close enough to send a tremor through the platform. Somewhere above them, glass shatters. A child screams sharp and sudden, then stops. The first people appear at the stairwell without tickets, without questions. A woman carrying a rolled blanket under one arm. A man guiding an elderly neighbor by the elbow. Two children in nightclothes, shoes, mismatched hair, still damp from washing. They do not ask permission. They do not look at Avery, they simply keep moving, drawn downward by instinct, by rumor, by the knowledge that the earth between them and the sky is thicker here. Avery opens his mouth to stop them. He does not. Within minutes the trickle becomes a stream, then a surge. Bodies press shoulder to shoulder, spilling onto the platform, filling the spaces where commuters stand in daylight hours. There is no luggage, no suitcases, just blankets, pillows, the odd gas mask swinging uselessly from a strap, faces pale under the station lights, eyes fixed not on the tracks, but on the ceiling as if listening for cracks that will tell them whether the ground above is giving way. The sirens continue, but now they sound distant, almost irrelevant, muffled by layers of earth and concrete. Above them, London is being dismantled piece by piece. Down here, the city is compressing itself, folding inward, becoming something else. Avery steps back, pinned against a column as the platform fills. He realizes with a clarity that surprises him that there will be no trains tonight, no schedules, no enforcement, only descent. That night, London did not run. London ran away. Black. The underground settles into its true temperature within minutes. 14 to 16 degrees, steady and indifferent, untouched by the seasons above. It does not warm for bodies or cool for fear. It simply exists. The air is heavy with damp concrete and old oil, the residue of years of trains grinding steel against steel. Beneath it all lingers the unmistakable smell of people, wet wool, unwashed skin, breath held too long and released all at once. Sound behaves differently down here. Every footstep stretches, rebounds, returns. A cough travels the length of the platform and comes back altered as if spoken by someone else. Water drips from unseen seams in the ceiling, slow and methodical, marking time when clocks stop mattering. Somewhere in the tunnel, a distant vibration hums, not a train, not a bomb, just the underground, reminding everyone that it is still alive. The lights are weak yellow bulbs strung along platforms and corridors, some flickering, some gone entirely. When a section goes dark, it does so without warning. Conversations pause, hands reach out. Then the lights return dimmer than before, and people exhale together. Darkness becomes something to measure, something to expect. What was designed to move bodies through the city now holds them in place. Platforms turn horizontal with sleepers laid edge to edge. Coats become mattresses. Blankets are claimed and reclaimed with quiet negotiations. Children curl against parents' heads, tucked under arms, eyes open long after exhaustion should have won. There is no privacy, only proximity. Breathing becomes communal. Hours pass without notice. Some people try to sleep. Others sit upright, afraid that if they lie down, they will not hear what is happening above. Nurses appear from nowhere, identifying themselves, softly kneeling beside the elderly, checking pulses, rationing aspirin. A corner near the ticket office becomes an improvised clinic. Another near the end of the platform becomes a place for the sick to be kept apart as much as that is possible. Life insists on continuing. Babies cry then quiet when a stranger produces a biscuit or a scrap of chocolate. Somewhere down the line, a woman gives birth on a bare platform floor, shielded by coats, held up like a wall. The child enters the world underground, the first sound it hears. Not the sky, but the echo of voices bouncing off tile and concrete. The underground is vast enough to absorb this transformation. More than 170 kilometers of tunnels lace beneath London, branching, overlapping, doubling back on themselves. Some run shallow. Others drop 20-30 meters below the streets, carved deep into clay and chalk. Spaces intended for motion become places of rest simply because there is nowhere else to go. At first, the authorities resist. They warn of overcrowding, of accidents, of panic. They issue statements. They post notices. None of it matters. The people come anyway. Night after night, the numbers swell into the hundreds of thousands. Eventually, resistance gives way to organization. Platforms are assigned. Sanitation is addressed. Water points appear. The system adapts because it must. And slowly something shifts. Fear does not vanish, but it changes shape. The first nights are sharp with terror, every vibration interpreted as collapse. Then patterns emerge. People learn which bombs sound distant and which are too close. They learn the rhythm of the all-clear. They learn how much trust to place in layers of earth and concrete. The underground stops feeling temporary. It becomes familiar. Names are exchanged. Small rituals form. Someone sings quietly near the stairs. Someone else tells stories to keep children from listening to the ceiling. The platform acquires a memory of its own, a sense of who sleeps where, who arrives early, who stays until morning. Above them, London burns, fractures, rearranges itself. Below, a second city takes shape pressed tight against the original, sharing its fear but not its sky. The underground is no longer a station, no longer a passage. It is a bedroom, a schoolroom, a ward. And sometimes when the ground shudders too hard, when the lights go out and do not come back, it is something else entirely. Down here, the city is learning how to survive by going still. It takes time for the realization to surface. At first, the underground appears uniform platform, tunnel track repetition. But as nights turn into weeks and weeks into months, patterns emerge that do not belong to transport. Corridors that do not lead to platforms, staircases that descend past the level where rails should be. Doors that open into spaces with no signage, no timetable, no obvious purpose. Not every tunnel is meant for a train. Beyond the familiar routes lie other layers. Deep-level shelters cut far below the working lines, carved quickly and quietly as the bombing intensified. Auxiliary passages branching at odd angles, too narrow for carriages, too broad for simple maintenance. Stations abandoned long before the war, repurposed without ceremony, their names erased from maps but not from walls. Some spaces feel wrong the moment people step into them. The geometry gives it away. Parallel tunnels running side by side with no tracks between them. Circular rooms where platforms should be straight, chambers shaped like a horseshoe, their curves deliberate, precise, offering no clear explanation in the language of rail engineering. These are not mistakes. They are designs following a logic that is not about movement, but about containment. Electrical infrastructure deepens the unease. Thick power cables run along walls where lighting should be modest, their insulation heavy industrial. Substations sit isolated behind locked grills, humming softly even when much of the system goes dark. The current feeding these areas is stronger than necessary for bulbs and signage, stronger than civilian standards would suggest. The power does not fluctuate when bombs fall nearby. It remains constant, guarded, purposeful. People notice. They whisper about it while sharing tea from chipped cups. They point things out to one another in low voices, afraid that curiosity itself might carry consequences. A father traces the outline of a cable run with his finger and shakes his head. A former electrician mutters that this much load was never meant for passengers waiting out an air raid. Then there are the marks left behind. Once eyes adjust to the gloom, the walls begin to speak. Names scratched into tile and concrete. Dates carved carefully, as if the act itself required patience and calm. Initials followed by the word alive underlined twice. In one place, barely visible beneath layers of grime, a sentence stands alone, still alive. Night 34. No one knows who wrote it. No one knows if Night 35 ever came. The message sits at eye level exactly where someone might rest their head while sitting on the floor. It is neither dramatic nor poetic. It is an accounting. Other signs tell quieter stories. Children's drawings sketched in pencil now smudged. Tallies scratched into corners, one line per night survived. A hymn verse written from memory, the words uneven, where the writer's hand shook. These are not official records. They are human ones left without expectation of being found. And then there are the places that stop all movement. Steel doors appear where corridors should continue. Some are painted to blend in. Others are bare, unmarked, their hinges heavy, their locks industrial. Behind them the air feels different, denser, untouched. A few are sealed not by design but by force. Brickwork, hastily laid concrete poured thick and uneven, as if speed mattered more than finish. After the war, many of these passages disappear entirely. Walls are built where there were once junctions. Maps are revised. Schematics quietly omit entire sections. There are no warning signs, no explanations, just absence. A corridor that should exist does not. A staircase ends at a blank wall. Those who worked the system notice first. Maintenance crews find doors that do not appear on any plan. Engineers encounter dead ends where their drawings insist there should be clearance. When questions are asked, answers are brief. Structural concerns, redundancy, not relevant anymore. The deeper one goes, the thicker the concrete becomes. The farther these spaces stray from passenger routes, the more substantial their construction appears. Reinforced ceilings, narrow access points, multiple turns that prevent direct lines of sight. Features that make sense if the goal is protection, not transit. The question begins to circulate quietly at first, then with increasing insistence. If these were only shelters, why are they so deep? If they were built for people to wait, why do they look prepared to endure? No one offers a definitive answer. Official explanations hover at the surface, safety, capacity, necessity, but they do not quite reach these depths. The architecture suggests anticipation. The electrical systems suggest priority. The sealed doors suggest something meant to remain unseen once its purpose had passed. By now, the underground has stopped feeling like a refuge alone. It has become a puzzle, layered and incomplete. Each clue points not to danger, but to intention. Someone planned for this. Someone decided how deep was deep enough, how much power was sufficient, which corridors would be remembered and which would be erased. Above ground, the war continues with brutal clarity. Below, the questions multiply in silence, pressed into walls, locked behind doors, waiting for a time when someone might ask them out loud. The story changes tone, not with a discovery, but with a pause. After weeks underground, certainty becomes harder to hold. Facts remain, dates, distances, blueprints, but they begin to feel incomplete, like the visible edge of something larger. The underground is no longer just a refuge improvised under pressure. It starts to resemble preparation. There are reasonable explanations, all grounded in wartime logic. One possibility is command. London was not only a city under attack, it was the center of an empire at war. If the surface fell, decisions would still need to be made. Orders would still need to move outward. Deep protected spaces could function as underground control rooms, insulated from bombing, connected by secure lines, capable of coordinating defense long after streets above became unusable. Another explanation is storage. War consumes resources faster than they can be replaced. Fuel, medical supplies, communications equipment, anything essential, becomes precious under sustained attack. Subterranean chambers, cool and stable, would preserve materials better than surface depots. Their depth would not be accidental. Their isolation would not be excessive. It would be necessary. Then there is continuity. The quiet idea that government itself might need to survive without a city to sit in, that London could be damaged beyond recognition, but authority could not vanish with it. Plans existed across Europe to ensure that leadership endured, even if capitals burned. Safe locations, redundant systems, routes designed not for public movement, but for endurance. None of these ideas are radical. All were discussed openly after the war, though rarely in detail. What unsettles is not their existence, but their proximity. That such preparations may have unfolded alongside civilians sleeping on platforms, children learning to read by yellow light nurses, delivering babies within earshot of sealed doors. Similar patterns appear elsewhere once the question is asked. Across Europe, wartime governments dug down. In Germany, vast underground networks were carved into mountains and cities alike. In France, bunkers stretched beneath Paris. In the Soviet Union, entire facilities were hidden below ground, designed to function independently of the world above. The logic was shared. Survival favored depth. London's difference lies in its overlap. In most places, civilian shelters and strategic bunkers were distinct. Here they coexist, layered within the same system, sometimes separated only by a wall, a staircase, a locked gate. The same tunnel network that carried commuters also concealed something more guarded. Engineers who studied post-war schematics noticed inconsistencies. Circuits that bypassed public infrastructure, ventilation systems oversized for passenger comfort, structural reinforcements that exceeded what air raid shelter guidelines required. None of these details prove intent. They merely suggest it. Historians urge restraint. They caution against reading purpose into coincidence. War, they argue, is chaotic. Projects overlap. Materials are repurposed. Designs evolve under pressure. What appears secretive in retrospect may have been simple improvisation at the time. An engineer adjusts a plan. A corridor is widened for safety. A door is sealed because maintenance funds run out. Others counter that improvisation still follows priorities. Someone decides where to invest effort. Someone decides which spaces deserve power when the rest goes dark. These decisions leave fingerprints even decades later. No single document resolves the question. Files remain incomplete. Testimonies contradict one another. Official records describe shelters, depots, offices, but rarely specify where one ends and another begins. The absence itself becomes part of the record. What remains is uncertainty shaped like architecture, the depth, the reinforced ceilings, the way certain routes were never opened to the public, even at the height of need, the way others were quietly erased once the war ended, as if exposure was acceptable, only while survival demanded it. The underground becomes less a single story than a layered argument. One layer insists it was built for everyone. Another suggests it was also built for something smaller, more specific, more protected. Neither cancels the other. In the end, there is no revelation, no unlocked file that explains everything. Only a narrowing of certainty. The realization that some spaces were never meant to be understood by those passing through them. That beneath the shared refuge of the city lay other rooms governed by different rules, answering to different fears. Not every underground space was built for people seeking shelter. Some were built to disappear. When the war ends, it does not end everywhere at once. Above ground, London exhales. Streets reopen. Windows are repaired with whatever glass can be found. The sirens fall silent first, cautiously, then for good. People return to their homes or to what remains of them. Life resumes in fragments. Below ground, something different happens. The underground does not empty so much as it is closed. Not all at once, not dramatically, but deliberately. Sections are taken offline, corridors are blocked, doors are locked and left that way. What had been tolerated out of necessity becomes inconvenient in peace. The official reasons are practical. Safety inspectors say, structural fatigue after years of constant use, flooding risks, aging electrical systems. Some areas were never designed for prolonged occupation. Better to seal them than to invite accidents. These explanations are written into reports, stamped, filed, and accepted. But not every decision is written down. Certain tunnels are not repaired. They are erased. Maps are redrawn to exclude them. Maintenance schedules simply stop listing them. Workers are reassigned. Access keys disappear into drawers and are never issued again. What was once part of the system becomes something adjacent to it, then something forgotten. Memory plays its role. There is little appetite for preserving places associated with fear. The underground carried thousands through the worst nights of their lives. It heard prayers whispered into concrete. It held grief that had nowhere else to go. Turning those spaces into destinations feels wrong to many. Better to let them rest. And there is another concern, less spoken but deeply felt spectacle. The war is over, but its scars are still raw. Opening these spaces risks turning survival into attraction, suffering into something consumed. Officials avoid the question by avoiding the places themselves. Decades pass. Those who descend now do so by permission only. Engineers, surveyors, occasionally historians. Rarely explorers granted limited access under strict conditions. They move slowly, guided by old diagrams and newer caution. Their flashlights cut narrow paths through darkness that has not been disturbed since the mid-1940s. Dust lies exactly where it fell. Thick, undisturbed coating rails, pipes, and floors. The air is still cool in the same way it was during the war, unchanged by seasons or progress. Breathing it feels like stepping backward. Each step lifts particles that have waited decades to move. Objects remain where they were left. A wooden bench pushed against a wall. A length of cable coiled carefully, then abandoned. Faded signage pointing nowhere. In some places, chalk marks still cling to concrete, barely visible but unmistakably deliberate. The marks are not instructions, they are reminders. There is no sense of death here. No bodies, no decay, but neither is there life. These spaces sit outside the flow of time, preserved not by intention but by neglect. They do not rot. They do not evolve. They simply remain. Standing in these sealed sections produces a strange unease. The mind expects resolution, either restoration or ruin. Instead, there is suspension, the feeling that something was interrupted and never properly concluded. The question of opening these areas returns periodically. Advocates argue for transparency, for education, for allowing the public to see how the city survived its darkest hours. They speak of guided tours, controlled access, careful preservation. Others push back. They point out that not everything needs to be seen to be remembered, that some histories carry weight precisely because they are inaccessible. Once opened, they argue these spaces lose their gravity. They become rooms instead of thresholds. No consensus forms. So the doors stay closed. Not because they cannot be opened, but because no one is entirely sure they should be. The underground continues to function. Above these layers, trains running on time passengers, unaware of what lies just beyond the walls. Beneath the movement and noise, there are still places where footsteps echo alone, where air has not changed since the war ended. They are not tombs, but they are no longer shelters. They are something in between quiet, sealed, and waiting, carrying the memory of a city that once survived by going underground and then chose carefully to leave part of itself behind. London did not survive the Blitz by standing its ground. It survived by yielding space. While bombs tore through streets and rooftops, the city learned a quieter discipline, how to retreat without surrendering, how to compress itself without breaking. Survival did not look like resistance. It looked like descent. It looked like people carrying blankets instead of weapons, choosing earth over sky, stillness over speed. The underground did not stop the bombs. It did something more subtle. It absorbed fear. It gave the city a second shape, one that could bend while the surface shattered. Above ground, London burned and rebuilt in fragments. Below ground, it endured intact, holding the people who would return when the noise finally ended. This is the legacy that rarely appears in victory narratives. There are no parades in tunnels, no monuments carved into platforms. What remains is not triumph, but adaptation, the ability of a city to disappear long enough to survive itself. When the all-clear finally sounded for the last time, London rose back into daylight. People carried what they could salvage from underground. Nights, habits of closeness, a new understanding of fragility, a shared memory of darkness that words could not fully contain. The trains resumed, schedules returned. The underground reclaimed its original purpose, but it did not shed everything it had become. Beneath the familiar routes, beneath the platforms, still crowded each morning, there remains another London. A city folded into itself, quieter, narrower, preserved in layers of concrete and dust. It does not appear on tourist maps. It does not announce its presence. It simply exists just beyond the walls, carrying the imprint of lives paused rather than ended. Some of these spaces will never be opened. Not because they are unsafe, not because they are forgotten, but because opening them would change what they are. Once light fills them, once footsteps multiply and explanations are attached, they become something else, rooms instead of memories, destinations instead of thresholds. There are no signs pointing the way, no plaques summarizing what happened, no official routes tracing how far the city went underground to escape the sky. The absence is intentional. It protects something fragile. History often demands visibility, proof, access. But not all remembrance requires exposure. Some memories are heavy enough to be honored by leaving them untouched. Some spaces carry meaning precisely because they resist interpretation. The sealed sections of the underground are not warnings. They do not ask to be feared. They ask to be respected. They remind the city that survival sometimes requires retreat, and that retreat leaves marks deeper than scars on buildings. London was not destroyed by the Blitz. It was transformed. The bombs did not break the city. They taught it how to disappear. And somewhere beneath the movement of trains and the rhythm of modern life, there are still doors that remain closed. No maps, no tours, no explanations. Not because they hide danger, but because there are memories that do not need light to endure. If you want to continue opening doors that history chose to lock after World War II, subscribe, and come with us down into the places where the past once hid, waiting for the noise above to pass.